to An Apple a Day with Dr. Amanda. If you're on YouTube, please like, share, subscribe, and also tell a friend. Our theme these past 2 weeks is really on building healthy mothers. And that's a really important topic. And whether or not you're an actual mother, right, you're an educator, whether you want to be a mother, you're in the process of being a mother, it's your desire of your heart. I just want you to hear, some strategies, because really, in essence, we all are moms as women at some capacity. Obviously, such a gift for, mothers out there that, have children, or you're adopting children, you're fostering children. There's so many different capacities of motherhood, but I really think it's important in today's society, right, that we look at and say, how can we continue to become and build healthy mothers for our children and for our generations? So with that said, today I am so delighted to have Jennie McQueen, who is a colleague and a friend, on the show today and as a guest. And Jennie is an educator, and she's an amazing educator. She has such a passion for children and engaging students, and always wants to do the best for them. And that goes into her as a mom. She's a mother of 4 kids. So again, thanks for being here, Jennie.
Thanks for having me, Amanda.
Sure. And so Jennie, what are characteristics of a healthy mother?
So I think that my definition of a healthy mother has changed over time, but where I am now, some of the words that really come to mind for me are balanced. I've realized the need for that balance in my life between giving to my kids and giving to myself. I also think, calm and kind of collected is another word that sort of comes to my mind. And just patience, I think, too. Patience with myself, with my kids. It's something I'm working on. It's not my best quality all the time, but definitely one that I strive for.
So, talking a lot about patience and how it continues to evolve, your idea of being a mother and learning a lot from your kids, right? And how to do that. And yeah, patience is definitely something I feel like a lot of times people say, well, I want more of it. And then you get lots of lessons, don't we, on that all the time. So thank you for sharing that, Jennie. And then what are some things that, I know you've sort of alluded to this, but what are some other things you've learned as a mom, like learned about yourself as a mom?
Things I've learned about myself as a mom. Well, first of all, I have 4 boys. So my kids range from 11 to 2. And one of the biggest things that I've learned is that each kid kind of needs their own thing. So one thing's not going to work for every kid. My 11-year-old can be a little bit more dramatic with things. So I know that I need to approach in a different way than maybe my 6-year-old might require, and also age-wise too. So I've learned that I have to change my approach. And kind of one of my biggest things too is like, I have to look at myself also. So I think before I've learned so much more from you, Amanda, too, especially, I think I would react first and then later on, be regretful of maybe the way that I handled the situation or did something. And so now, one of my biggest things I try to is check myself first and then think about what I can do. It's not always the easiest thing, but it's helped me from opening my mouth too quickly or reacting in a way to one of them that I would not have liked to. And I like to think that then they're doing it also later on themselves.
Good. That's a lot of wisdom. I like what you said about, each of your 4 boys, right? 4 boys have their own individual personality, right? And how you interact with each one of them, you've had to learn that, right? You've had to observe and notice, okay, so like my one child is not going to respond, right, the same way as another. So that's really important. And that could be hard too, right? Because you might have one of your children, I don't know if this is the case with you, Jennie, or even out in the audience, right? Where you have some kids who are like, okay, they're similar personality to me, right? Maybe. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's hard, right? And then you have other kids that you're like, oh my gosh, their personality is totally different, right? Like I'm not quite understanding what this is, right? Or how to address this. So that's like a really good point. And, just, in your, vulnerability and saying importantly, okay, I have to take a step back, and just say like, how am I processing it, or how do I stop and not respond right away, but just take a moment, right, and pause and then respond. So I think those are all really helpful, and hopefully out there in the audience, if you're this, going through the same thing, you can relate, I'm hoping. So Jenny, and I guess you've sort of talked about some of this, but what are some lessons you've learned as a mom?
Well, one, I think that you can't judge yourself against other moms. That's something I think everyone struggles with, especially whether you're a mom, an educator, whatever your role is in life. I think we tend to judge ourselves against others in different capacities. And I know that I still find myself doing that sometimes, or, if I'm not living up to a standard I might see on social media or some other capacity, you tend to think, well, I'm failing at this, or this isn't going right. And I'm starting to kind of just take a breath from that and say, like, it's not about that. And, I can't, you're going to fail some days, you're going to fall down. But, the biggest thing, my mantra that I try to tell myself now all the time is, connection over perfection. Make the connection with them, make sure every day I'm doing something with them or spending that time with each of them. And then, it doesn't have to be perfect all the time, and that's okay.
And that's good. So that connection over perfection. So really just finding a way for that connection, knowing it's not going to always go exactly like you think it will, or even in those conversations, but just enjoying that present moment. And that can be challenging, and even when you talked about the comparison, I feel like a lot of times, we hear this saying, comparison is a thief of joy, but it kind of is. And it's almost like, as we're evolving as people, right? And there's some painful areas sometimes, or we're like, oh man, I have to do X, Y, and Z, and just knowing that you're enough. If you're a mom out there that is like, oh my gosh, right? Like you're starting out, or you're just overwhelmed by like seeing all these mom groups, or, people out there and they're like, do this or do that. Yeah. Sometimes, I don't know if you agree, Jenny, it's like, just start where you are.
Yes.
And surround yourself with people that are willing to like love you where you are, and to be real, and talk about that stuff with you, but that will love you wherever you're at.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And so I guess even thinking about like the good, the bad, and the ugly, that's what I was kind of thinking for lessons. Like, was there anything that was so kind of painful moment that led to change for you as a mom? Like, I know you said you've talked about some things, but was something that stands out to you that really was like, okay, like I really want to shift in this approach?
Yeah. So I think I touched on it a little, but again, it's taking that breath before I kind of respond, especially when I'm under stress. So what I've learned, and, during this time with this, pandemic, we've been home together a lot more often than we would have been. And, the high levels of stress for all of us is stressful, going to online learning, working at home. My husband was working the whole time, so I was home with them. And things that I've learned from myself going kind of along with, both of those things, the shame based responses, is I've learned that a lot of times when I'm responding in a way that like I don't like, it's more about me than it is about them. So for example, during this great online learning time that we had, my 11-year-old had to be on Google Classroom, and I started, watching what he was doing and checking in on him directly. But then we moved to me being like, everything's good. Are you good? Did you get it done? And he was saying yes. And then 2 weeks before the end of the school year, his teacher emailed and said he had all of these assignments due. And so what ended up happening was I ended up reacting in a way I didn't like how I reacted. He was upset, I was upset. I ended up calling my mom and like spilling my life, just crying and freaking out. And she's, what I learned is like, first of all, have someone to vent to because you need that, but also it be someone that's going to kind of be able to listen and then give you that feedback. Because what she did for me enlightened me to say like, I think you're more upset about you thinking that you failed than that he didn't do it. I think like you need to give yourself credit that you're all under this stress. And that was eye-opening for me. So that allowed me to like say, yeah, that is why I'm upset. And then go talk to him and say, hey, I reacted not okay. And I have a lot going on. You do too. What can we do together so we can figure it out? So, I think now like I'm starting to not always perfect, again, connection over perfection, but trying to find that ability to take the breath and then analyze when something doesn't go the way that I want it to.
And that's really good. And I know you talked about that pause, but also having like, safe person, like when you're like frustrated or when you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Having somebody that is important to listen, even as a mom, like you need some type of a place, a safe place, right? Where like somebody you can listen, you can trust to say, how can I process this, right? How can I process these emotions? And, even with that, I'm sure other parents maybe will relate, grandparents, parents during this, pandemic, being home and having pressures of
Yeah.
work, or even being, stay-at-home mom and like having the pressure of like not being able to go all the places you need to, there's been a lot of pressure. And, Jenny just, and just trying to get everything going. And then I like what you said with, in that case, like you ended up responding because of things with you. And how many times do we do that? We don't mean to, but it's like something in us and we're like, ooh, and it, and that comes out. And so I think that's great that you're able to process with, even your mom to say, okay, I can see that this is coming back. Or sometimes it's a lot of times we want to try to take responsibility that isn't ours, like it's hard.
Yeah.
You're a mom, or like, we care about people, we care about things, but we're taking on these extra burdens of responsibility that aren't ours. And that's a lifelong thing, I think, being aware of that. So those are really helpful. And for those of you in the audience, I always like to think of you, if you're going through this, perhaps, as you're reflecting, you might relate, to Jenny, I'm sure, like it's not easy. And I feel like and I don't know, Jenny, if you think this is like a lifelong learning for you, like, learning how to like navigate, being the mom and like learning personalities and not like, stewarding them, your kids and loving them, but knowing you can't like take on everything, and that's hard. So good. Even thinking about this, and I know this can be part of things for family. And again, we all come from different backgrounds. I know Jenny and I are trauma informed. We are really passionate about helping people, especially those who've gone through trauma, and all of us in some form. We can't ever escape it. Everybody has had or been impacted by trauma. A lot of times in our families, we all have gone through things and we all have different personalities. So how we process that is different. And so thinking of that, Jenny, are there any changes that you've made based on, family patterns or things that you've noticed that, again, sometimes we don't realize till as we, go through things or have our own family. So what are some things that you've noticed or changed?
Yeah. So first I'll say like I feel very fortunate that I feel like I did grow up in a very healthy home with two parents who, I don't have any moments when I was reflecting and thinking about that stand out to me as truly traumatic or to that extreme. But when I do think about it in terms of knowing information that I know now and, then reflecting back on it, some of those things that we've talked about, my husband too, based on his upbringing, is one, we have boys. So first of all, a lot of times he'd be like, well, boys don't cry, you suck it up and you get over it and you do it. And we've had a lot of conversations about like, it's okay if they want to cry, or like, we need to like talk with them about like, not just you're mad, you're sad, you're angry, like, what are you feeling? What's happening in your body? What's going on when you're that mad? And that's okay, because it's going to be better than them, shutting off. And that's been a little hard for my husband and a learning curve for him. And then additionally too, that I think, and right, in some instances is appropriate that, I think I grew up in a house, and so did my husband, that consequences always meant punishment, sort of. So it was always a punishment. And I think we're trying to get to that point where like not everything needs to be a punishment, and that doesn't always need to be the consequence for it. Sometimes, sure, yes, there does that punitive piece maybe, but we're trying to kind of change that narrative of like it always needs to be you're grounded, or it always means that you get privileges taken away. It kind of needs to be based on the situation, and that they're going to take something away from it, or grow from it, rather than just continuing the cycle of it.
And that's a good point too. And I like how you talked about you and your husband, really kind of talking, because again, right, we grow up and our parents only know what they know, right, what they have gone through, and then they raise us, perhaps changing some things, and now you and your husband are kind of reflecting and thinking about, okay, how do we, does everything need punishment? And I think that's a great point, and even in society, it sort of is telling, because a lot of times we tend to go to that punishment route, right? Where we think, okay, it has to be this way, versus like, are there a lot of things that are conversations, or asking like what was happening during that moment or a lesson learned. So I like that, you're thinking about that, even as audience, perhaps thinking. And again, that punishment mentality tends to be something we may be taught or say, okay, X, Y, Z, right? And so that is a good point. So thank you. Even in the audience, if you are struggling with that, that might be something. One good thing that I've actually had that I love, and it's similar to what you're talking about, Jenny, is positive discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of, like talking or like being able to sort of do like some of those restitution type things, like if something spills, right, and clean it up, versus like that punitive. So those are some examples that might be more subtle for some of you out there as well, that you're like, okay, what does that look like? So it might just be as simple as, if something gets spilled, like, we'll clean it up, so just so we can give you an example. Speaking is always reflecting. When you think of your 4 kids, Jenny, what do you think they would say to you as a mother? Which I know could be hard because you're like having to compliment yourself, but what would you think your kids would say to you as a mom?
I hope they would say I'm trying my best. And that, I like to think, like that we spend time together, that I'm present. I think that's what I would hope that they would say. I'm not perfect. I do not claim to be perfect. But I think that I am there, and I think that's a big piece of it, is doing your best, trying your best, and being present, and that they're loved too, that you love them. So hopefully that's what they would say. My mom loves me and she is there for me.
I love it. So like they know that you're there and you care and you love them, and that you're present. And that might be something interesting in the audience, or even like, who knows, I'd be curious to see what Jenny, if you ask your kids today, right, it'd be interesting what they say about you, and again, kids at different ages, but I feel like it really does, is telling, and I know, Jenny, you have a range of ages for your kiddos, but again, it might be interesting to hear, like, what do they say? Sometimes it might be silly, like, you give me peanut butter, I'm sure, like some kids might tell you something really goofy, but then you can just record it. But, again, like sometimes it's hard for moms, or you as moms, to like think about, ooh, like what would they say? Was the kindness, and you forget how, like Jenny said, you're doing your best, right? You're loving, you're there, you want to do well. I mean, I can't imagine any mom, right? Like, or family at once that doesn't want to do well. So again, sometimes it's just, we don't always know how, like, how to keep growing in it, but to encourage you, that might be one thing. Think about, what would they say? Thinking about this, and I just mentioned about moms who, again, may not know how to make changes, Jenny, or perhaps they, have gone through things and they don't quite know. And audience is okay. Like maybe you're here because like, I don't know how to be a healthy mom, or I don't know how to grow from what I only know. And so, Jenny, is there anything, because this is a place of hope and safety or encouragement, that you'd want to say to mothers out there that, again, like they don't know how to break any of those patterns, or they don't know what to do because they've never had that mother themselves?
Mm-hmm. So I would say, one of the biggest things that you can do is to empower yourself, is get the knowledge that you feel like you need. It's out there. It's not always right in our face now, but definitely like the importance of attachment. Like I think now, knowing what I know, and I hope and think that my kids have pretty secure attachment. I wish that was something they did a video on when you are having a baby. I wish there was like more talk about like why those first 2 years are so important for kids, and that mom connection, especially with those kids. So I'd like definitely like look into that, but again, don't think like you have to be this big change overnight. Like it needs to be, I'm going to implement this huge thing or get a bunch of stuff. Like it can be so simple, like just simple changes. And honestly, one of the biggest things you can do is start with you too. Like, what do you need? Because I am a much nicer mom when I take care of myself, even if that means away from my kids for a short time. I need to step away to do yoga, or I step away to go shopping at the store, with my mask right now. But it's, what do you need too? Because again, you can't pour from an empty cup either. So know that taking care of you means you're better equipped to take care of your kids.
That's really good. So yeah, and I like how you mentioned for mother self-care, right? So if you are going through a hard thing, getting away, being able to do something for yourself, something that you like to do, so that like Jenny said, you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're struggling or you're not, you're feeling exhausted and burnout. And again, like there might be ways of it. And I know, some of you, again, I may not understand exactly, but you may be a single mom, right? You may be out there and not have a lot of time, but as much as you can, being able to take a moment, for yourself is so important. So thank you, Jenny, for that. I know there's sometimes books or resources. You mentioned any videos. So Jenny, are there any books or resources you think that are practical or helpful and simple for moms who really want to continue to grow and evolve?
Yeah. Well, for one, I work with like Dr. Bruce Perry and also Peter Lee, doctors and authors to look into. They have some really great books that are really simple, easy reads that can help with more of the knowledge piece and some strategies. But a great website too that I've used a lot of their resources, Conscious Discipline. .com, I think. I don't think it's .org. .com. They have some really great things on their website that you can use to help with your kids, especially even now during this time. I've used a lot of the resources. One of my favorite ones is like their kind of like restorative chat that they have. I use that a lot with my 11 and 6-year-old because they share a room. They get on each other's nerves quite a lot. And part of it is like, hey, one person tells their story, we listen to what they have to say, and then you get your turn. And then we move forward. Like, so it's some great strategies that can help you say, okay, well, what do we need? I can print off a printable if I need to kind of remind me, which is helpful for me too if I am in the moment, don't know what language to use. So I'd recommend that one for sure.
Well, that's excellent. So those practical things, and again, I can certainly list that, for the podcast as you're listening, I'll have that in the description, which you probably saw. And then for YouTube, having descriptions. So Dr. Bruce Perry, Dr. Levine. And again, you can, look them up on YouTube. There's definitely different areas and videos. So if you need short ones, I know there's a couple that just talk about, connection, that healthy communication. And then Jenny's the website Conscious
Discipline. I think it's
Discipline.
I don't know if it's .org. I'm forgetting now. What
I can post it. I'll look it up though, but Conscious Discipline. So again, some practical things that you can look up on your phone, look on the internet, and I will find, that site for you, and that'll be posted for everybody out there. So thank you. And then, again, like just coming up to this conclusion of our time, and I really appreciate it. I don't know if there's any other, thoughts you can certainly share, but I wanted us to end on a wisdom tip, right? Because we're always talking about our doses of wisdom and things that we've learned. So Jenny, is there any parting, words or a phrase or something that you live by, for like our parting wisdom tip on building healthy moms?
Well, I probably repeated it many times, but again, I tell myself all the time, connection over perfection. Connect with your kids. Don't try to be the perfect mom. And also self-care is not selfish. You need self-care. So remember that too.
That's good. Yeah. So self-care is not selfish, right? It'll help you become the best mom. And again, that connection over perfection, right? Because we're not perfect. And that's like part of the lessons, I think, right? Even us as adults or kids, like we're all humans and we're going to make mistakes. And a lot of times our lessons end up becoming wisdom, right? So like Jenny is bringing, a lot of wisdom for her learning, in motherhood and being able to tell you some of the great things that she's learned, right? And some things that were harder to learn. So hopefully if you are a mom out there, you or a listener, or you're going to be a mom, or you're an educator, you're not a mom yet, but you do a lot of things. You're a mom of like kids in school, right? Or you're babysitting. I hope that you can take some of this information and be able to apply it. I really am so grateful for you being here. And you never know, like, share, and subscribe for YouTubers and podcasts. If you enjoyed Jenny today, you never know, she may be coming back to talk more about motherhood or other areas that she does so well.